Welcome everybody, this is 11.5. Okay, factoring trinomials when a is not equal to 1 and with common factors. Okay, so first there, remember when we did GCF, right? So this is the GCF. So step one is factor out the greatest common factor, GCF. Factor out the greatest common factor. If the remaining trinomial is a equals 1, then we use the x method. If the remaining trinomial has a is not equal to 1, we use the x box method. Right, so both ways that we know how to do. Just first step, we take out the GCF. That's it. Okay, so let's look at this first example, right? So first one, we want to take out the GCF, which is 2, right? So they all have a factor of 2 in it, 2, 10, and negative 100. So we can factor out 2, and we have x squared plus 5x minus 50, right? And if you notice, you could divide this, right? Divide 2, divide 2. They all have a factor of 2, right? And we just left with x squared plus 5x minus 50 is exactly what's in here. The leftovers, right? The leftovers goes in the parentheses, back in the fridge, right? So that's one way to factor GCF too. Okay, then we have our remaining problem here. And you notice our a is equal to 1, right? So this is the important thing. So if a is equal to 1, then we use x factor, right? Then we use x factor here. We have a times c, which is negative 50, right? 1 times negative 50 gives you negative 50. B on bottom, right? Which is your 5. Your two factors that multiply to negative 50 and add to 5 are going to be 10 and negative 5. Because we can do like 1 times negative 50. That doesn't add to 5. 2 times negative 25. That doesn't add, right? 5 times negative 10. That adds to negative 5. So we can flip this around, right? This doesn't work. This doesn't work. So you go negative 5 times positive 10. So that's how you get those two factors, 10 and negative 5. And then once we have that, we write it in here, right? So you write it x plus 10, x minus 5. That's our two factors. And then remember to put the 2 in the front, right? Remember to include the GCF in front. All right, so that's the only difference we're doing. We're taking out the GCF first, and then we're just factoring this as usual, right? So factor as usual here. Whatever is left, right? So we factor as usual. Okay, next one. This one we took out a factor of 4, right? So then a GCF of 4 for each one, right? If you divide by 4, divide by 4, divide by 4, you could take out the GCF. So we have 4x squared plus 13x minus 35. And that's our leftover that goes in the parentheses. And then again, we just factor this as usual. And now you notice our a is 4, right? It's not equal to 1. So we need to use Xbox, right? The Xbox method. So we're still doing A, C, B on bottom. We find our two factors, 20 and negative 7. And then we write that in our box, right? 20x and negative 7x. And then we find one of the GCFs. We did our trick last time. So we find one of the GCFs. So 4x squared negative 7x. You could do 4x squared is 2 times 2 times x. Right? And then negative 7x is just negative 7 and x. So the only common factor here is x. So our GCF right there is x. Okay, that's our GCF. And then we use that to find the other values. Right, so we know x, in order to get 4x squared, we have to multiply by 4x, right? So 4x squared, so that's 4x. This has to be negative 7, so we get negative 7x. And if this is negative 7, and this is negative 35, this has to be positive 5, right? That's the only way to multiply to get negative 35. And now we have all our factors right there. And that's our solution, right? So x plus 5, 4x minus 7. And then remember, we had that 4 in the front, right? So we remember this 4. Remember to put the 4 in the front. And that's our answer. Right there. And we can always check by multiplying. Okay, so let's do the first one. Yeah, so we just continue on adding on what we know, right? So same thing. First thing, we're going to factor out the common factor, right? So we notice this one has a factor of 3 in it. 21 you can divide by 3. 30 you can divide by 3, right? So if you found the GCF of all these factors, it would be 3, right? So we could divide by 3, divide by 3, divide by 3, right? And we're left with x squared minus 7x plus 10, right? So that's going to go in the parentheses here. So x squared minus 7x plus 10 that we have so far. And then we took out the 3, so we put the factor in the front, right? That's our GCF. Right there. So that's our GCF 3. And are we done? No. Right? So we need to factor this as usual. Right? So first step, we're going to factor out GCF. So we got that. Then we need to factor this. Right? So since a is equal to 1, right? Our x squared is just 1x squared. Right? Factor using x factor. Right? So we're going to factor the remaining. So if we factor this one, right? A is 1, B is negative 7, C is 10. Right? So we got that. 1, negative 7, 10. Right? And then we can write that out. So then we use our x factor. Right there. A is C on top, B on bottom. Our A is 1, C is 10. Multiply that together, we get 10. Our B is in the middle, negative 7. Two factors of 10 add to negative 7. We're going to negative 1 times negative 10. No. Negative 2 times negative 5. That adds to negative 7. Right? They both need to be negative to add to a negative. And we have a positive multiplication, right? So our two factors are going to be negative 2 and negative 5, right? Because negative 2 times negative 5 is 10. That's like the top number. Negative 2 plus negative 5 is negative 7. That's how we get the bottom number, right? So we got negative 2, negative 5. And we just write out our factors. So since this is here, right? So this is going to be 3 and then 2 parentheses because we factored that. And then we got x, and our two factors was negative 2 and negative 5, right? So x minus 2, x minus 5. And this is our solution right here. Right there. Oh, I wrote the wrong number. Right, so that's a negative 2. So x minus 2 times x minus 5 right there. And we're going to check our solution by multiplying. Right, so x minus 2 times x minus 5. Either way, either factor box or FOIL the box. So we just multiply our binomials first, right? X minus 2, x minus 5, x times x, x squared, x times negative 5, negative 5x, negative 2 times x, negative 2x. Negative 2 times negative 5 is positive 10. Right, and our factors in the middle always add up together. So we end up with x squared minus 7x plus 10. Right, is what we got right there. Right, we factored that. Well, remember the 3 in the front, right? So that 3, we need to multiply it. And then we multiply it, right? 3 times x squared, we get 3x squared. 3 times negative 7x, we get negative 21x. 3 times 10, we get 30. Right, so this is equal to what we started with right there. So that is correct. Okay. So first thing, just factor out the GCF, what you can factor out, and then whatever's remaining in the parentheses, we factor, either using X factor if A is equal to 1, or if A is not equal to 1, then we need to use the X box. And always check your answer and multiply it out, make sure it's correct. Okay, see number 2. Okay, so we're going to factor the trinomial. Number 2, let's look at what's the common factor. Yeah, what if we can't see it, right? Let's find the GCF. So what if we can't see it? Let's write it out. 20x squared, right? So 20, and we can write our factor. Factor tree, 2 times 10. 10 is 2 times 5, right? So our numbers, 2, 2, 5. And that's all we're using, right? 2, 2, 5, and then 2 x's. Negative 34x, we get negative 1 and 34. Let's break that down. All right, so we get 2, 17. That's it. We're stuck, right? So 2, 17, 1x. Negative 12, right? So negative 1 and then 12 is 2 times 6. 6 is 2 times 3. So we get 2, 2, 3. 2, 3. Then we look at what's common. Right, our common numbers, we have 2. And that's it. That's all in common, 2. Right, so our GCF is 2. So we're going to put that in the front as our GCF. Right, so put that there. Another way is, if you see it, you could divide all these by 2, right? Divide by 2, divide by 2, and you get your solution too. It's another way to do it also, right? We divide this by 2, everything by 2. And see what we get left. We get 10x squared minus 17x minus 6. Right, that's the same thing. Same thing as our leftovers here. Then we get 10x squared, negative 17x, and negative 6 is our leftovers. All right, so our LO, 10x squared minus 17x minus 6 goes into our parentheses right there. Right there. Right, but we're not done yet. Why? Because we have to factor again. If we can factor that parentheses, we got to do it. Right, so let's look at our ABC. So you notice the ABC for this one, right? So 10x squared minus 17x minus 6. So you notice our A value is 10, our B value is negative 17, our C is negative 6. Right, just in order like that. So because A, right, since A is not equal to 1, it's equal to 10, right? We have to use the X box. So we use the X box, right? So we still set up our X, AC on top, B on bottom. So A times C, so it's 10 times negative 6 is going to be negative 60. Our B on the bottom is negative 17. Okay, and then we find our factors of negative 60 to add to negative 16. So let's break that down. All right, so we have 1 times negative 60. That doesn't add to 17. 2 times negative 30. No. 3 times negative 20. That works. All right, that works. Because this is negative 60. And then 3 plus negative 20 is negative 17. Right there. So our two numbers are 3 and negative 20. Right, these didn't work. So 3 and negative 20 are our numbers. Right there. All right, so we have our X, then we put it over to the box. We set up our box. And remember what goes in the first box, right? Our first term here. So that's 10x squared. It's a different color. So we got 10x squared for our first term. Our last term, -6, goes here. Then our two middle numbers that we found, 3x and -20x. Put it with the x. Right, so you kind of can match it up, right? So 10x squared, -6 is our last term. These two always add to the middle, right? So this adds to -17x. So it is correct. Okay, so then we find our factors. So what we can do is we can find a GCF of any one. Each row, so one row here, one column. Let's figure this out. Let's figure this one right here. So we have 10x squared and 3x, right? So that's pretty straightforward. 10x squared is, let me write that, 2 times 5 times x times x. 3x is just 3 times x, right? The only common factor here is x, right? So that's our GCF, right? So we're going to put that right there as our GCF. So x, right? So x is our GCF. And then we find out the other factors. What does it have to be, right? So x is here. This one needs to be 10x, right, to get 10x squared. So this has to be 10x. And you look at how do you get 3x. So you get 3. All right, so we know that's 3. Then we figure out what does this number have to be to get -6, 3 times -2. Right there, and that's our factors. Right, so we get 10x plus 3 and x minus 2. Those are two factors right there. Okay, so we just write that in our answer. So it's going to be equals 2, and in parentheses, it's going to be 10x plus 3, x minus 2. That's our answer. Right there. All right, so this one, what you think of the GCF? Whatever's left, if your a is not equal to 1, you got to use the x box. Right, use your x, two factors, first term, last term, figure out one GCF, and then figure out the rest, and you get your factors. Okay, so let's do last one. Okay, for this one, let's look at, so 30, 81, and 15. That's pretty much what we're looking at, right? So what are the factors of those? So 30, 30x squared is going to be, right, 2 times 3 times 5. Right? And then 2 x's. 81 is going to be, right, let's break that down. 9 times 9, which is 3 times 3. So you have 4 threes. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1x. Then 15 is this 3 times 5. So we look at what's common. Right? They only have one thing in common, 3. Right? So that's our GCF, is 3. Okay, so we put that in the front, 3. And we look at what's left over. Right? So we have 10x squared, 27x, and 5. Right? So that's our leftovers. So we put that in here, 10x squared plus 27x plus 5. Okay, another way is you could just divide all this by 3. And you still get the same answer, right? 10x squared plus 27x plus 5. Same thing. Right, our leftovers. Then we got to get here, right? So we got to get to where we can factor it. 2 parentheses like that. Right, so since a is not equal to 1, we have to use the x box again. Right, so we set up our x box. So we have 10x squared plus 27x plus 5. Right, our a is 10, b is 27, c is 5. Right, set up our x. A times c, b on bottom. So a times c, 10 times 5, 50, or b is in the middle, 27. So factors of 50 adds to 27. 1 times 50, no. 2 times 25, yes. That works. Because that's 50. 2 plus 25 is 27. So that works right there. So our two numbers, 2, 25. We're going to put that in our factor box. Right, because a is not equal to 1. So we have to use our box after that. Right there. Right, again, our first term, right, 10x squared has to go in the first box. Right, then we look at last term, 5. Let's go right there, last box. Then our two numbers, we got 2x, 25x. And then we find one GCF, either one, whatever looks easier, right? And you can just kind of see it too, right, when you get here. So let's do this one again, the column, first column, right? 10x squared is 2 times 5 times x. 25x is just 5 times 5x. Right, so what do they have in common? 5 and an x, or the first row we did. So this is going to be 5x. Right, that's our GCF. Right, then we find the other one. So what does it have to be? Right, figure it out. The puzzle box. So 5 times what equals 10? 2. And it's x squared, so we need the x. We kind of figure out, so 5 times what equals 25? 5. And then this one, 5 times what equals 5? 1. Right, this has to be 1. So 1 right there. And that's our factors, right? So 5x plus 1, 2x plus 5. And that's what we write right in here. So 5x plus 1, 2x plus 5. And then we're done.